Oh, okay.
Okay, I think it's working now.
What the fuck? That's crazy.
Okay, well, I just hope it doesn't go into portrait mode, because if it does,
And this is on YouTube already?
Facebook and YouTube, and your guys' Facebook page, and our
Oh, it's
Facebook
already
page,
there?
yeah, and on YouTube.
Because I was like, I don't need to do it.
Oh no, it's already streaming to your page.
Mine. No. Yeah. I just don't. Yeah, they are being they're doing the job.
I didn't say you were coming.
Oh, this is me. I'm not presenting.
I know.
I just set everything up. Yeah. I was behind the scenes stuff.
Let's see. We should have had you behind the scenes. Tierney Keon.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
All right. Find a seat. I wonder if somebody's sitting by that man. There's that lady sitting by that man.
You can go ask.
Hey, Roger.
Hey,
Rather, Richard.
yeah,
I recognized you from behind.
yeah. I could tell through your mask who you were there. How are you doing?
Good, good. Before we just been online.
Yeah.
Anyway, nice to meet you.
Oh, yeah, actually.
The guy,
Yeah.
and it really, since this year, especially with people like you, knowledgeable people, I've been trying to get that Davenport page going a little bit, get some followers and try to give them some history, not just.
No, I like the one recently you did that had the village. I'd never heard of that village, the Meskwaki village that the guy, different chief I'd never heard of or anything. That was interesting.
I spent like the last week or so trying to track down. Apparently, after that battle in Detroit in 1712, a bunch of them went to, according to the French source, because a bunch of Meskwaki went to New York and established residence with the Seneca. So in 1730, when they got massacred in the what do they call that?
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I can't think of the name they call that place now, but that's where they were trying to go. But apparently, yeah, I'm learning all kinds of new stuff now. That's great.
Neat.
I just want to say hi. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, we'll talk. Yeah, I think everybody here. Which is good. Yeah, this is well. Exciting things in the mind. Yeah, right. No way. Not close. I'm trying to be involved and participate, so it's going well. I'm not sure it's so good. This is one step. These are the 5
Sorry to bug you, but are you guys going to post this?
Yeah, it's on Facebook
Yeah.
Okay.
and YouTube.
Okay. I didn't know if it was just live or if you're going to post it. Thank you.
If you haven't yet, strongly encourage you to grab some refreshments, maybe something salty or something sweet from the back. We'll get started in about 5 minutes, okay? I don't want to take that stuff home, so grab it, please.
I'm out of
I just heard you say, when you said, it's coming to the,
Amazing.
I agree. You know, and since I've gotten to like Roger and Don, I keep trying to, I know this is weird of them, but I'd really like to see someday, like in the Davenport of having like an open house for Meskwaki people to come back, you know,
This is your,
yeah,
this is where you died.
make that connection and inform people, you know, in the city area about.
But I just heard the name Colonel Davenport.
Yeah. Is there one next to you next?
Oh,
Yeah. I just love it.
You could sit on it.
I could be like 15 years ago and all of a sudden like, yeah, here.
We'll move it. You can sit.
so that is there, but that is correct. Thank you very much. That's what they really talk about. Yeah.
That sounds kind of new to me. Yeah, sorry. What do you brother?
Yes, and then that is yes, that's why.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I can't think. It's funny because yeah, Keith had kind of figure that he, I mean, for purposes of creating, because he was, but they, Keith was in like 18, I don't know, in 1820 went to Washington D.C., which they used to do to take and Keith up and show around, show how big the United States was. Yeah. He tried to get Keith, some of Keith's band, they'd already moved.
they're not even popping up as an option.
Yeah.
I would think it's time. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sure have. I mean, I don't really know thinking that around. I didn't count it as an item. 8, 9, and 31. It didn't go to high. It came back in 31. Yeah, they were like the last group that had most of the group and voluntarily by then. I like the flower shaped village. And you right across the river from each other. I kind of understand.
Yeah, sport.
Yeah. This is, take this mesh and move.
Let's do a ball.
You know, that's not the early interesting subject because Europeans weren't here for any.
Yeah.
I like this first right now.
Yeah. It'll be.
Yeah, I know almost all the time.
Afternoon. You guys hear me okay in the back? Yeah. All right. First and foremost, thank you. Thanks for joining us today. This has been a long series for us with the Americas Scenic Byway Road Trips presented by the Department of Transportation. We started these back in January, so this is our final event. And first and foremost, again, thank you for sharing some of your Sunday and thanks for coming joining us today. It's hard to believe that our road trip series has covered over 1,500 miles. But I feel like once you get to that 1,500 mark, we've entered the threshold of legitimate road trip, which is kind of awesome. And as I mentioned, this is the 6th and final stop that we're hosting today. Before I get into today's presentation, just want to extend some acknowledgments and some thank yous. First and foremost to Johnathan Buffalo and Tierney Kiana for hosts and helping us program and presenting today. I approached Johnathan and Tierney in December, just under the premise that you can't really get into some of the origin of Iowa history without having a robust knowledge of the Meskwaki experience here across the state. Other folks that I want to acknowledge and say thanks to, Emily Whaley, who's in our local systems bureau. She is our scenic byway coordinator, has helped us with facilities across the year. Debbie McClung, Christine Anderson, Jenny Butcher, all the social media, the signs you see, those folks have done an awesome job helping us out this year. And then in addition, Prairie Rivers and specifically Jeannie Howe has been a tremendous asset with helping us plan these events and helping these events kind of take shape and really get out and help us share a lot of American 250 history. Planning for America 250 events started at the state level back in 2024. So again, as we are on the eve of the 4th of July, it's pretty cool that we made it. And then I also want to note today's presentation is sponsored by the Iowa Department of Transportation as part of our semi-quincentennial America 250 activities for 2026. America 250 focuses on 5 thematic topics. There's a number of events still planned, so I encourage you to get out and soak those in. Those topics include unfinished revolutions, the power of place, we the people, American experiment, and doing history. And I think you'll kind of see a blending of a number of those themes today in our subjects and with our presenters. So why today's topic? This Meskwaki Nation obviously has roots that are extremely deep. They span centuries and millennia, much deeper than the United States history. And obviously our country that we live in today has had significant impacts and effects on sovereign and indigenous nations. The Meskwaki story and the connection to Iowa is extremely unique, and that connects to this place right here. The Meskwaki Nation in the state of Iowa share nearly 200 years of remarkable history, and those stories aren't shared in other states or with other sovereign nations. So today's speakers, I'll introduce them as they come up, but first off we'll have Kathy Gourley, and she's going to be talking about early statehood history and Meskwaki connections prior to statehood. Cindy Nagel's going to touch on some Meskwaki archaeology from the Iowa River Valley and connect to other places. And then we're going to wrap up with Johnathan Buffalo. If you've not heard any of these presenters speak before, you're in for a real treat, which I'm pretty excited for. So with that said, Kathy's going to start us off today. Kathy is a retired archaeologist who has worked most of her career in Central Iowa. She was with the State Historical Society until recently when she retired. Her main research interests focused on Iowa's territorial period and forest movements of the Meskwaki and other Native American tribes. Her master's thesis identified locations of Meskwaki and Sauk villages and associated Euro-American facilities. So Kathy, you're ready.
Thanks, Devin. As I got, you guys turn it?
No.
Nope.
No. See, I turn it off. A little closer. I was looking at you. You had it down. You must be able to talk about it. As I started thinking about this 250th, I thought, gosh, I wonder what I was doing at the 200th. And I realized that I was in college in 1976 is the time when I changed from being an English major to an anthropology major. And I'm so glad I made that choice because I fell in love with anthropology and archaeology and history. The other thing that I did in 1976 is that one of the ISU professors had an arrangement with the Meskwaki Settlement where he would bring a group of students, college students, to Tama, and the Meskwaki high schoolers could come and we would tutor them. And it was okay if they had questions about English or history, or when they had something like chemistry or physics homework, I just rolled my eyes and went to get a snack, because I was not going to be able to help. I wanted to let you know that throughout this, I talk about this place as Iowa, although please remember that it was not actually Iowa until officially the state in December of 1846. But in the meantime, it had been, in addition to the native people who called this land home, the French claimed it for a time, the Spanish claimed it, the United States purchased it as part of the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. And after the U.S. got it, then it was first unorganized territory, and then Michigan territory, Wisconsin territory, and finally Iowa territory, and eventually the state of Iowa. I'm just going to call it Iowa throughout because it's beautiful for us. So the Sauk and Meskwaki have been allied tribes throughout their history. This map and the next one were produced by the Meskwaki GIS department, and the black line shows the travels over the centuries of the Sauk and Meskwaki, starting with the St. Lawrence Seaway and then on down into Iowa in the 1840s and on into present-day Kansas. The United States has always dealt with the Sauk and Meskwaki as if they were a single tribe. And although they have been allied for many, many centuries, they are not a single tribe. They are two distinct but allied groups. Throughout this, I will call them Sauk and Meskwaki or Meskwaki and Sauk because I was looking at 1830s and 1840s documents, and those always treat them as a single entity. So I'll get that next slide. Oop. Oh, it gives me a preview on here. I'm not used to that. There are an incredible amount of resources that document the tribes in the 1830s and 40s. There are travelers and explorers accounts. There were artists who came and made paintings. There's even a daguerreotype, which is an early photograph of Keokuk. There's the wife of one of the Indian traders kept what she referred to as a diary, although it was actually more of a memoir of her days when she was living in the frontier. It's just a really rich amount of documents you can look at. When I did my thesis research, which I'm shocked to think that was 35 years ago, I had over 200 different references that I was able to find about Sauk and Meskwaki interactions in Iowa in the 1830s and 40s. So I want, sometimes when you do history, it's kind of abstract and you talk about documents, but I want you to think about the people who lived through this. So I wanted to show you a few images of Sauk or Meskwaki individuals. I will tell you that all of the photographs that I have are of men because the head men were the ones who were interacting with the Europeans more than women. This first one is Keokuk. He was a headman in the Sauk tribe, and this is a painting by George Catlin in 1835. And this is the same man. It's a daguerreotype from 1847. And then Keokuk, it was taken in Kansas after he had moved there. And then in 1848, he died. So it's sort of at the very end of his life. This is Powashik, and it was by Charles Bird King. And then those images were redone by Henry Inman, and then they were made into lithographs by McKinney and Hall. This is a lithograph from the McKinney and Hall publication in McKinney and Hall published between 1837 and 1844. So I don't know exactly what date this one is. And this is a Meskwaki leader, Waukesha. He is also, the State Historical Society has a pictograph where he showed all the different animals that they were hunting. And the original is there at the Historical Society. So it's really nice to have an image of the person as well as the image of what he made about what kinds of materials, what animals they were hunting. So this map just gives you a general region with a couple of important sites. Fort Armstrong was at Rock Island until 1836. And Saukanack is the main Sauk village, which was established in the 1700s. That was just on the east side of the Mississippi River at the Rock River mouth. Up in what's now Wisconsin, you see Fort Crawford, which was at Prairie du Chien. There are actually two Fort Armstrongs. The first one was on low ground, and a lot of flooding went on, so they moved it to higher ground. And then in Northeast Iowa, you see Fort Atkinson, which was established in 1840 and was abandoned by the military or by the militia in 1849. It does still have some standing structures from the 1840s because they built some of the buildings with stone rather than wood. So you should go see it. And actually, Fort Atkinson is only peripherally related to the Sauk and Meskwaki. They were never, Sauk and Meskwaki were not actually at Fort Atkinson, but the U.S. military members who were interacting with the Sauk and Meskwaki for a time were stationed at Fort Atkinson. So the time that I'm going to talk is between the Black Hawk War in 1832, when the Sauk and Meskwaki made a large cession of land west of the Mississippi River. And then I go to an 1842 treaty. The two tribes had to relinquish title to their land by the fall of 1845. So some people who were too ill to travel in the fall of 85 were officially allowed to remain in Iowa until the spring of 1846. So those boundaries from the session of 1832 until the official removal from the state in 1846 define the limits of my familiarity with documentary sources. Now, I do want to point out that about 80% of the Meskwaki did not leave Iowa at that time. They formed small settlements and did their best to avoid government authorities. In the 1850s, they were able to purchase land, and that's a story for another day, but that's the land where you're on now. And that is unique in American history, that the tribes early on purchased their land. So this 14-year period from 1832 to 1846 was quite tumultuous for the tribes. The Meskwaki history during this period is truly one of cultural persistence in the face of adversity. This map, the area in pink, oh, it's not in pink there. The area surrounded by red is all the land that the Sauk and Meskwaki signed treaties with the U.S. concerning. Now, many other tribes signed treaties that overlap these areas, but this gives you an idea of how far their territory extended. And the first treaty was signed for the Sauk and Meskwaki. The first treaty was signed in 1804, and the last one in 1867. And there were a total of 18 treaties. Many of those occurred in the 1840s and 30s and 40s. This map shows the approximate boundaries of the land that the Sauk and Meskwaki had by about 1820 in Iowa. They still had some property, some lands in Illinois also, but I focused on Iowa. And then this next map shows you all the treaties that were done in the 1830s and 1840s. You can see they split it up and piecemeal took it from the tribes over that period. So the first treaty was in 1824 in the very southeast corner of Iowa. And that treaty allowed people who were of mixed heritage, European and Sauk or Meskwaki, to hold those lands. And then the upper ones, the neutral line, was established in 1825, and it runs kind of from the northeast down to the southwest, where it intersects with the Des Moines River Valley. And so it's just that center line between the red and the what looks like yellow there. It's actually green on my slide. So that line was established because the Dakota or Sioux on the north and the Meskwaki and Sauk on the south were often encountering one another during hunting expeditions, and there was some considerable conflict between them. So the U.S. government created this line, which was a designation on a map, and everybody was supposed to stay on their side of the line. Well, it was not marked in any way on the ground, and so, of course, no one paid any attention to it. We knew where that line was. So in 1830, the U.S. had another treaty with them, which had the Dakota on the north ceded a 20-mile strip, and the Meskwaki on the south ceded another 20-mile strip. So now there was a 40-mile wide area that was supposed to be that the Meskwaki and Sauk on one side and Dakota on the other we're supposed to stay out of in order to reduce conflict. So in the US government, within 3 years, I think 4 years, put the Winnebago or Ho-Chunk tribe, they moved them from Wisconsin into the neutral ground. It had to be the perfect place for anyone. Yes, I would like to go live between the two groups that are in conflict with one another. In 1830, the U.S. government had passed the Indian Removal Act, which had devastating effects for all the indigenous people because the plan was to move all of the eastern tribes to the west side of the Mississippi River. Some Meskwaki were already mostly here, although they did have still their village in Illinois. And in 1832, Black Hawk, about 1,000 of his followers, crossed the Mississippi River to go back to their summer village in Illinois, and found that white settlers were occupying some of that land, and they wanted to have their village back. It soon became clear that the Native people were not going to survive this because about 7,000 federal troops and state militia were called out. And this 1,000 that were following Black Hawk included men and children. So for about 15 weeks, Black Hawk moved his people farther into Illinois and then up into Wisconsin, trying to retreat to safety. Finally got to the Mississippi River, and in the Battle of Bad Axe, as people tried to recross the Mississippi River to safety, many of them drowned or were shot in the water and killed. Estimated more than 500 Meskwaki perished in battle. So after that, Black Hawk was in prison for a short time, and then the U.S. wanted a treaty as payment for the Black Hawk War. And so that first portion is the land was given up in the 1832 treaty after the Black Hawk War. You'll notice there's a little diagonal rectangle there, and that is known as Keokuk's Reserve. Keokuk had encouraged some of his followers to stay on the west side of the river and to not return to Illinois. And so in payment, or because of his willingness to stay out of the conflict, they gave this 400-acre reserve, which included his principal village and 2 other villages that had already been established there. But within 4 years, the U.S. had another treaty which had given up his reserve. And then 1837, just a year after giving up the Keokuk's Reserve, the U.S. government wanted another cession of land, which was called the Second Purchase. And I need you to understand that during all of these treaty negotiations, it really was not, and there wasn't 2 equal parties deciding what to do. As all of these tribes were being pushed into smaller and smaller areas, and there's a rush of Euro-American settlers, the resource base is collapsing. Hunting and trapping and fishing are really not very sustainable or very lucrative anymore. And so the tribes part, it was you sign a treaty, get an annuity, get some foodstuffs, perhaps get some facilities, and the U.S. government will pay off your debts to your traders. If you don't sign the treaty, then your family is likely to starve because there was not enough food. so in fall, well, first in 1840, the annuity, at that point, tribes were supposed to get $40,000 a year as an annuity. And the 1840 annuity was not paid because um, the practice had been to pay the money, half the money to the Meskwaki headman, half the money to Sauk headman, and then they would distribute the money within their tribes. Wishamakwa was another Sauk leader, wanted to go to the heads of households. And so because of this conflict, 1840 annuity never got paid. In 1841, the U.S. government wanted to do another treaty, but they decided that as a compromise on this fight about the annuity payments, they would pay 1840 annuity to the headman of each tribe, and then they would pay the other on a pro rata basis, numbers of individuals in each household. And so they paid out the 1840 treaty annuity, they paid out the 1841 annuity, and then the U.S. government said, we'd like to purchase some land, let's do a treaty. Well, the tribe said, hey, we don't really want to get rid of any of our land, and now we have some money, so we're not in selling our land. So we do not have a treaty in 1841. That made some of the settlers who were on the boundary line open to claim some land as soon as the treaty was finalized. So angry that by the summer of 1842, they shot the commissioner of Indian, the superintendent of Indian Affairs and the Indian agent, shot him in effigy. So it's a violent protest, but not actually a killing. But things were very tense on the land. So in 1842, the tribes sold the rest of their land that was in Iowa. This part right here was, it was one treaty, but there were two segments. The first one was that they could stay on the red portion there until the spring of 1843. And then the western part, they could stay on until the 11th of October of 1845. And they chose the 11th of October, which was 3 years from the date that they were signing the treaty. And then after that treaty was signed, they were to move to a reservation in Kansas at a property to be determined. So during this time period, there were, I looked at 4 different property types: forts, agencies, villages, and trading houses. So these are the forts that were in Iowa at the time. Going up the river, the first one was Fort Des Moines number 1, which is at the town of Montrose. The second one is called Fort Sanford, and it was technically never an official military post, even though they had soldiers headquartered there during this troublesome time in 1841 and 42. And the third one is at the city of Des Moines, and it's known as Fort Des Moines number 2. Then the one up in the northeast corner is Fort Atkinson, which I said the Sauk and Meskwaki didn't necessarily deal with the fort, but the same soldiers who occupied Fort Sanford and Fort Atkinson, and then Fort Des Moines number 2. So these people were all familiar with one another. In terms of Indian agencies, there were 2 in Iowa for the Sauk and Meskwaki. First was at Agency City, which is near Ottumwa, and then the second one was the Raccoon River Indian Agency, which was just across the Des Moines River from Fort Des Moines number 2, and it was occupied 1843 to 1845. And then trading houses, I found references to at least 17 trading houses during that period, 1832 to 1847. Because they're not government agencies, like the fort and the agency was, but rather private companies. It was much harder to trace exactly where those trading houses were, and I don't really have great confidence that there were only 17. I think there may have been more, and I just haven't found records of them. And then these are the villages of the Sauk and Meskwaki during that period. The yellow are the Sauk ones, and the Meskwaki are in red. And it's not so much, those villages were not all occupied at the same time. Every time there was a treaty, you had to pick up your community and move it to the next place, the correct side of the treaty line. So there were villages, then in 1832, then villages in 1836, changed again in 1837, changing again in 1843, and then in 1845. If you think about it, you probably all moved somewhere at some point in your life, and what a hassle it is. Well, you're doing this at least 4 times in 14 years. And it's not just your own residence that is moving, but instead the entire community. So I will leave it at that. The Meskwaki, I think, are the most resilient people and had this incredibly traumatizing time in the 1830s and 40s. And today it feels like the tribe is thriving, and that just makes me so happy to know people that strong-willed.
All right, Kathy, I have one question for you.
All right.
I knew I was gonna learn something new today. That's great. Okay, Fort Sanford,
Yes.
recorded archaeological interesting in terms of a blueprint. Tell us a little more about that.
I don't think it's been excavated. I think we know where it is. In fact, I'm quite sure we know where it is because it had been a trading house which burned. And so somehow the traders were able to petition the government to pay for that loss because they thought it must have been evil done by someone in the tribes. It was in good enough shape that they then offered it to the federal government for use in this interim period to house the military. So it was known as Fort Sanford. You'll find that in correspondence, but I don't think it was ever officially. But when the traders made a claim as to where the buildings that burned down, they sketched out all the building locations. So I think we have a pretty good sense of where it is. It's not in a town, it's close to a Tama, but it's been 35 years since I looked at that. Any other questions? Yes.
The Meskwaki and the Sauk trading.
In the beginning, they were trading
Hey,
furs.
Kathy, would you
Yes.
repeat the question?
Oh, sure. She was asking what the Sauk and Meskwaki were trading. Early on, they were trading furs. They would trade furs for European fabrics, gun flints, beads, all kinds of copper kettles. There were lots of things that appealed to them from the European side, and the Europeans wanted the fur trade. As the natural resources kind of crashed and couldn't do that, then they were still buying things from traders, but the traders would put it on credit. And so then the traders would have these big debts, and so they would advocate with the tribes, or you should sign a treaty. So it was just this constant trying to balance the books, and there really weren't enough resources for the amount of people that were coming to the land. Any other questions?
Thank you. All right, for baseball fans, Cindy's going to be our middle reliever. Cindy Nagel is the managing partner at Tallgrass Archaeology LLC. She's a native Iowan with 30 years of archaeological experience across the state. She's conducted all phases of archaeological excavation across Iowa and surrounding states. Cindy's research interests include North American historical archaeology, post-contact period archaeology, and gender material culture in North American archaeology. I met Cindy about 25 years ago. I was a young student in the lab, and one of the things that always sticks out to me about Cindy is just her kindness. From day one, she's helped me learn, pointing stuff out. Hey, you should check this out. And I'm very happy, same with Kathy, to say that these are both dear colleagues 25 years later. So help me welcoming Cindy Nagel. There you go, man.
Thank you. Get my water ready here in case I choke on my spit. Can you guys all hear me? Okay. If you can at any point, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll try and swallow the mic so you can hear me better. So as Kathy had stated, I too was around at the 200th. However, I was only 6 years old, so I had no clue what was going on. So, but I'm sure I enjoyed the parades and all the candy. So my talk is on the Meskwaki village of Powashik and Waukeshashi that is over in Iowa County, near south of Manna. So it's reported as the 1839 to 1843 village. And this is going to be, there'll be a little bit of history background, but not much. It'll kind of focus more on the materials that were discovered at this site. So as Kathy had talked earlier, the major villages in Iowa through the 1830s and 1840s, you can see that, you know, you got the Sockinaw down here, you've got some Cedar County, and then they come up the Iowa River. And this is the one right here that I will be talking about today. Oh, I gotta put my readers on, sorry. So with this was started out as an Iowa Archaeology Society volunteer project, I guess. And it was originally founded by some locals in South Amana, and they brought that attention to the State Archaeologist Office in Iowa. And Cindy Peterson, many of you probably already know, she was the forefront on studying this site and a lot of Meskwaki sites. And I just kind of jumped on her coattails because I was very interested in it as well. So she's been my mentor on this kind of stuff, as well as Kathy. So in 1839, Waukeshashi relocated his Iowa River village from near Iowa City, just about 40 miles downstream from today's settlement. That same year, his village, Powashik's village, was affected by disease, and he and his people joined Waukeshashi, creating a village about 500 to 1,000 residents. Today, the archaeological traces is about 6 acres, and there's other sites associated with this village. So the two prominent leaders in the territorial area were Powashik and Waukeshashi. These are probably these images are the images that you're going to see a lot, because obviously there's not a lot of images of these two leaders. So we all tend to use the same ones, and I like them because they're very colorful and very strong. And as you can see, you know, this one was McKinney Hall in 1838, as Kathy had mentioned earlier. And then, as you can see here, Waukesha has the other different spelling, and I will get to that here a little bit later. So there are various sources that place Powashik's birthplace along the Rock River in Illinois around 1790. There's one account of a village in Iowa about 1797, or one at an unspecified location around 1813. So Powashik became a leader after the massacre of chiefs and braves by the Santee and Menominee in 1830. He was appointed temporary chief by the tribal council to hold that position as unifying symbol of the village and preside over the tribal council, and will relinquish as soon as the proper member of the Black Bear clan is old enough to resume duties. Waukesha, there's a lot less known about him. So Waukesha appeared, there's various spellings of his name as well. He doesn't appear to be the signer of any government treaties. And there are several documents, mostly primary sources, that list Meskwaki with a similar name, but slightly different, and it's probably just a rendering of that name. So these are the two that I will be talking about, the materials from the village of where we believe they had joined together around the 1839 time frame. So, that's not very clear. So this one up here, these are various villages that you'll see of Powashik throughout different sources. And then you've got Waukesha, who had even twice as many various spellings. And then these are the sources where they got that spelling. So when doing the research, you have to take into account that a lot of the traders and agents and stuff like that probably spelt it phonetically based on their knowledge. So if you see something close, you've really got to do a deep dive to make sure that you're talking about the same person or researching the same person. So it's a fun challenge, but there's a lot of rabbit holes to go down on that. Next slide. So this is a GLO map showing the site. Can't really see it. Red doesn't show up too well on this, but the village site is right in here. There's a trading post that was associated with this village, the Patterson Trading Post, and then this here is an old Indian trail. You can see here, there's a farm. It's an 800-acre plowed farm that the government had required to have plowed for the tribes to try and teach them to be more like European farmers. So since it's a village site, I thought it'd be good to get Pearlie's village sketch drawing. Although I apologize, you can't see it too well on the screen. But in 1880, she had sketched an arrangement of a Meskwaki village site. Over here on the right, it's kind of traced based on, you know, some of these elements on this side. You can see that, jump to the other side here so I can see it. So the plaza here is, was kind of the dancing ground, and the tribal members would be their knowledge on this. But then you had your dance house, you know, and other houses around the center dance plaza. So there are two views. This is two views of Meskwaki Winyup graves. And I did grab the ones that were covered because I just wanted to show how intricate these are designed and how well structured they would take the elements and form them into, you know, their house. So with that, I'm going to jump into the archaeology. So there was a previous study on the trading house a couple years prior to this study. They did do a little bit of work, did a pedestrian survey, which for those unfamiliar, archaeologists get together, walk like this, look for artifacts. So if you see people looking down at the ground, they're probably archaeologists. But because the visibility, as you can see, was so bad, you know, you have the corn stubble change and then all this weedy vegetation growing up. We decided to try and do some geophysical studies to see if we could see if it could pinpoint any anomalies on the ground that might be some features, you know, like post holes or cache pits, stuff like that. And I'm going to point out here, this is incorrect. At the time, I was pretty new at geophysical survey, and this gentleman here was the knowledgeable one, but we were both not knowledgeable on this. This should actually be carried close to the ground to actually get any good reads. And that said, the geophysical study did not give us very good readings. And because of the limited budget and time frame, there were, go to this next slide. We did there was only a few grids that we studied, and those were ones that were based on possible anomalies from the geophysical studies. Others were based on the high concentration of artifacts we did see on the ground surface from the pedestrian survey. And so if you look here, these are the grids, and the red are all positive. So obviously we stuck one here and studied. And it was I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of chaotic out here with, you know, volunteers and all this stuff and trying to keep everything straight and organized and recorded. And thankfully I had help from other people as well. So the grid, most of the grids were 20 by 20 meters, which is about 65 to 66 foot. So they were fairly large. And let's see here. So we chose these areas based on positives, and we also did some metal detecting out there, but we only had one person that was knowledgeable on how to operate one, so we had a lot of probably unuseful data, let's just say. Okay, so here we also did auger testing, shovel testing, and slot trench. So the shovel tests were 40 by 40 centimeters, which is about 15 to 16 inches. The slot trench they were 40 by about 100 centimeters, so 15 by 59 inches. So we tested these anomalies through this combination of auger testing, shovel testing, and slot trench. And metal detecting, as I said, was unhelpful. So at grid 5, which is this, sorry, I keep turning into, grid 5 is right here. So in grid 5, there were 3 anomalies that were tested, slot trench and shovel testing, and then at grids 6 and 7, it's not on here because there wasn't, oh, I guess 6 is right here. But there wasn't much for anomalies to pinpoint and try and test. So because we weren't getting a lot of good readings on the geophysical or the metal detecting, we decided to run a line of shovel tests through the north-south and then east-west, try and see what was going on with the site, see if we could catch any other features or any other cultural materials. And then in grid 8, up here, so it's grid 8, test 9. So it's right here. Okay. There were 2 pulse moles that were found. It started out as a 40 by 40, but then as that first pulse mold was discovered, it was expanded out to about a 50 by 100 meter, 50 centimeter by 100 centimeter test to see if there were any other additional features. I'm backwards on my slides here, I apologize. So this is an example of a shovel test, a 40 by 40 centimeter shovel test, and this is a slot trench. Just to give you an idea of what those are going to look like. So those there were 2. You can see one here and one here. This is feature 1. This is feature 2. And they were found about, I think, let me see what my notes here say. So feature 1 is an 8 centimeter diameter post mold, and that's about 3 inches. That was visible from about 50 centimeters to 62 below datum, so somewhere here. And then the second one, feature 2, was a 16 centimeter diameter post hole, and that's about 6 inches in diameter. They were probably actually in the higher elevation, but because it was a plowed ag field, a lot of it had probably been, disturbed and scattered in this what we call the AP horizon in the plow zone. And both of these taper down into the bottoms with straight walls. And their depths were 62 centimeters and 64 centimeters, which is 24 to 25 inches deep. So when finding the pulse molds is a really good indication that it's very likely that it was a village site. It just gives more evidence because those pulse molds would have been over these. So they would have dug them down, to make sure that the structure is secure. And the two pulse molds were only about 30 centimeters apart. And if you look at this map, there's a couple that look pretty close together. You can just hypothetically say, or go out on a very long limb, say that maybe it's, this part of the structure. But further studies would have to be done. So when we were doing this test, obviously we come across cultural materials. So we found one piece of burner and very few pre-contact period pottery sherds from this site. And these are, so the this is a sherd, but it lacks temper. This is some burned earth, and these are pieces of pottery, and they're, they look like body sherds, and they're pretty weathered. So, but because this village site had a trading post, and a lot of times the trader would follow the tribes to their next location instead of the tribes following the traders. So, a lot of people think, oh, the tribes follow the traders to their house. Well, there's accounts that I have found that it's actually the opposite. So the traders would follow the tribes. But some of the materials that you get on these sites, there's not a lot of indigenous made materials. And part of my curiosity and questions on studying this is why are certain elements desired by the Meskwaki over others? Are there just all pole fragments as opposed to any, plate fragments? Because plates weren't something that they traditionally made. Everything was bowls. So if they were going to get something from a trader, they're going to get bowls. They're not going to get plates because they're not. That's not something that they traditionally use. But the images up here. So we got pipe stems, fragments, pipe bowl, gun flints. This is some lead screw. You got glass and European ceramics. This is all material that you typically find at village sites that are historic time frame. And just a side note here, one of Powashik's village over in Johnson County on the Iowa Hawkeye Wildlife Management, it was noted on the GLO as Powashik's village, but when we investigated it, it was all European material. So if it hadn't been mentioned on that GLO, archaeologists would have just considered that a historic scatter associated with Euro-Americans and not the Meskwaki tribe and Powashik's. So it's interesting to try and feather out, what happened to some of those, were there indigenous materials that maybe got washed away or we just didn't see them in where we were looking, maybe further out. Who knows? It's something that I want to continue to investigate for sure. So these are some more. So up here we've got some trade beads. This is a bare knuckle, I think. Does anybody else know better? Okay. And then these are scrapers, point, arrowhead, that they would have used for hunting and hides. Whoa, that went quick. So again, we have gun flints. There were some, wasn't this site, but I have found sites where there were both native-made gun flints and European, French and English gun flints. So again, that's a kind of a topic question that I'm curious about as to, is there a way that you can tell what was preferred? Did they prefer the French over the English? Probably not the French because they didn't get along with them well. Did they make them better than the English? That's a study I'd like to figure out, but it might be a bit difficult to try and get the good information that I'm looking for. So over here we have some gun parts. Gotta remember what this guy is. So this is an S hook. This is a kettle fragment with wire. Here's a glass bead. And then, oh maybe, no wait, that's the bridle bit. These are some of the other parts. But, so we got the flintlock and ramrod guides up here. I don't know, some people are really interested in historic firearms. And so they're really good at letting you know what was preferred by, Europeans, Americans, what was the best to hunt this, what was the best to hunt that. Much like today, some people prefer a shotgun, some like to bow hunt. So, other than that, so the testing and studying that we did here was pretty minimal, because of funding and time constraints. But there's a lot more that can be studied out here on this site. And I think the best thing would be to do a full geophysical study using multiple types of equipment, and there's 1,000 of those too, to try and determine and pinpoint better where maybe some more of the village side areas are in relation to like the trading post and such. So there's a lot more that can be done at this site and other Meskwaki sites in Iowa, because they are a wealth of information, and it really does show the fortitude that they had by having to move constantly to the west and again and again and again, with their whole village. So I think further study would help with getting kind of more of that timeline more tight and secured, I guess. So that pretty much does that's good. I did it in 20 minutes. So, does anybody have any questions? Yes. Those are good. So a lot of these sites were discovered either on the GLO maps, and the surveyors were doing due diligence. They would know there was like a village there. Sometimes they knew the chief was, and they would mention that. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of historic documents, trade posts, the guys that ran that, the shire, Indian babies, religious people, when they would go through and try and convert everybody to Christianity, they would take notes, fur trappers, a lot of, anybody that, at that time would have account of what they encountered, vegetation, there's animals, the people that we get into, stuff like that. How landowner access. Well, kind of depends. Sometimes you have landowners that are very open to understanding what's on their property. Sometimes you have don't tread on me. So you do what you can to access the properties that you want to try and study. So.
Is this all still under?
Yes. Yeah, it's still under agricultural production. Part of the study and the future tasks is to try and get it out of production and also get it on the National Register of Historic Places. Which if we do that, and we might as well do a multiple properties document of all the known Meskwaki sites across, that way we can record it and I'm sure they probably, his question was that a village of 1,000 people probably weren't all hunter gatherers, but some people that they must have done farming as well. And I'm sure that is the case. And with a lot of these tribes that are being pushed west with the treaties, a lot of their procurement comes from these traders, the Indian traders. So, they, instead of hunting, like maybe the animals have been overhunted, like during fur trade, so there's not a lot of that, so I can't trade that in for anything. So that, as Kathy had mentioned, then they get credit, and that sometimes these traders were a little sketchy. So they weren't the best to the tribes. this. They wanted more and more, the tribes less and less. So,
Say that the Sauk and Meskwaki were definitely um, practicing corn, beans, squash agriculture throughout this area.
yeah, by the time they got to Iowa, they had been, they weren't as hunter gatherers as we think of, yeah, as they were back in their original homeland. Anybody, any other questions? Comments, suggestions? Great, thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Johnathan Buffalo grew up on the settlement in Tama, has served the tribe through a number of positions and began in the Historic Preservation Department in 1993. He's been a cornerstone of the historic preservation of tribal issues in the state of Iowa for over 40 years. He's participated in countless consultations, repatriations, and memorials. Johnathan's research focuses on all things Meskwaki, and he regularly engages the public to share in-depth about the uniqueness of the Meskwaki experience. I first met Johnathan Buffalo a number of years ago through a mutual friend that we had, Doug Jones. Doug has since passed away. But Doug and I met Johnathan one day for lunch, and as we were taking the elevator up to the restaurant, Doug asked me if I had met Johnathan before. I said, no, I know him. I hadn't met him. He goes, well, prepare to learn a lot. And I think that was about 25 years ago, and every time we get together and chat, it's the same experience. So please welcome Johnathan Buffalo.
Can you hear me? Pretty good? Well, my grandson went and got this at the museum because I need a podium. So, anyway, welcome to the Meskwaki Settlement. We have been here since 1857. But as a people, we are very old people in this continent. We are at least 40,000 years old. But tribally, we remember the last ice age, which is 15,000 years ago. So, and we were contemporaries of megafauna, mastodon, saber-tooth tigers, and all those animals. And that's the world we were created by our Creator. And we believe in our creation story just as much as anybody that has creation stories in the world. And our creation story says we were created out of red earth. The original people were created for the rest of us. Since then, they had children. We are conceived, born, live, and we die. And that place is right there, along the St. Lawrence River. And we stayed there for a long, long time, living with our Creator. And he taught us everything we needed to know to live in that world. So he didn't teach us how to make this. He didn't teach us how to make computers. He taught us how to make airplanes, how to make maps, and things like that. But eventually we started migrating down and ended up in Connecticut. And in Connecticut, so we You got to remember, this part, this land, this took thousands of years of movement. This took hundreds of years of movement. So when we stayed there, we were there a long time. Then we eventually moved to New York, Niagara Falls areas. And then down to Ohio. And the Ohio Meskwakis are the last group of Meskwakis that totally lived in their world. They had no knowledge of Europeans. They didn't even dream of Europeans. So those are the last untouched Meskwakis. By the time we moved to Michigan, towards the end, that's when the Europeans come. And because of European pressure against other tribes, we moved to Wisconsin in the 1650s. And in Wisconsin, that's where we went. We met the French. Met the machine. With the Canoe people. But like I said, we're very old people. When we used to live up here, we met another people. And we call them family. But when we translate that name, it's old people, meaning Vikings. So when we met the French, we thought, because the tribes were coming to us and said, we got to meet these people. They got stuff. Iron, beads, cloth, coffee. You got to see these people. And they got swords. And we said, they got swords? And they said, yeah. And we thought, they're back. The man and the Gushis are back. Vikings are back. Well, come to find out, it was just some short little stinky French guys. And so, but the name stuck. But we translated it to canoe people, because they always came in canoes with their traders. And but by 1700, that relationship turned into war. And it was a war against us, the French, and their Indian allies. And it's called Fox Wars in history. And it's been estimated that at pre-contact, we were about 40,000 people with an army of 1,000 men. That's just what, it's the army. So, and it started in 1701, but in 1712, the Jesuits declared holy war on them. And they said to their people, Indian and French, the Meskwakis are enemies of you and God. And killing them is not a sin. And if you die from them, you shall receive eternal life. And that's the holy war. So the war started in 1712 on the attack, because the French invited the Meskwakis to go back to Detroit, which one band did, 1,000 band of women, children, and old people. It was not a 1,000-man army, it was families. So when the Meskwakis got there, the French encouraged the other Indians to attack that village. So they did, and the survivors fled back to Wisconsin. So that's where the shooting started. And in 1726, the French king legalized the Jesuit decree and made it legal. And he said, I want these people gone. I want no trace of them. So, and he told his people, killing these people is not a crime. And no slaves. I want their corn burnt, their dogs killed, their houses burned. I want nothing to see these people have existed forever. So, and that's by 1730, we dispersed. One group went north, one group went west, one group went south, one group went east, trying to reach the Senecas in the Great Lakes. Mostly were the group that fled south. But otherwise, other groups caught up with us in Iowa when we crossed into Iowa in 1735. And so we entered Iowa, we become Iowa in 1735. And we have found peace, safety in this land. But why would you think Iowa? Because if you look at this land, that's a bioregion. What comes to Iowa ends up over there. So this is our bioregion where we have lived for thousands of years. Within this land, we found shelter, food, medicine, everything we needed. But now we are living at the edge of our bioregion. We still consider ourselves, we are still home, because this is home to us. This whole thing is home. So we're at the edge of our home, but we're still home. When we look out the window, when in the morning we go out, we see our creation. We feel we're still home. And so when we entered Iowa, I got to tell you, a couple years ago, Wisconsin Public Television were doing a story on Appleton, Wisconsin. And they're doing their research. They said, hey, Fox Indians used to live here. I wonder what happened to them. So they Googled us. And they found out that we were living in Tama County, Iowa. So they came down and I did an interview. And a lady interviewing me asked me, do your people ever miss that area, your old home? And I said, well, it's a big question and it takes a big answer. I said, we have moved many times. We have left homes many times. Each Meskwakis that lived here love their land just as much as we love our land today. And there was sorrow every time we moved. I said, so it's a what if question in Wisconsin. What if we were just as nice as those other Indians in Wisconsin and we did everything the French wanted, become Catholics, give up our women and everything, did everything they wanted to do. There would have been no Fox Wars. Nobody would have died. And today we would be one of the major tribes to live in Wisconsin, in southern Wisconsin. We would be more like Chippewas that have multiple reservations. We would be like that. Because nobody would have died. And I said, this building, our existence, we would all disappear. Because we are the products of chance. But we would be gone if that happened. Number two, what if the French succeeded in exterminating the Meskwakis like they planned? We would be an archaeological mystery in Wisconsin. There would be debates. Who were these Fox Indians? What did they speak? Did they speak Algonquin? Did they speak Siouan? You know, things like that. And again, this building would disappear. We would be gone. We would vanish if that happened. I said, because our great-great-grandparents would have fled to Iowa to have children. But what happened is survivors came to Iowa and they ached for their homes, for their graves of their deceased. There was sorrow. Then one thing happened. Babies were born here in Iowa. And they grew up. And they would listen to their grandparents, parents talk about this mystery land up north. And they would go play. Then they grew up. They had kids. And those children grew up and had kids. And those people are every Meskwaki's ancestor. Their grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents. So I told her that's how Iowa became home. And I said the question to answer is no, we do not miss our old homes. This is our home today. And I said, and three things have to happen to become home when they moved. First of all, you had to plant your crops, your corn, sweets, beans, and squash. Plant them and harvest. That meant you survived one season. You survived, you could harvest your crops instead of some French guys coming and burning it. But you survived. Second, the ceremonial cycle had to be complete, from spring ceremonies, plant ceremonies, to fall ceremonies. That meant spiritually, he made it 1 year. Then, again, babies were born. Fourth is we bury our deceased people on the land. That made it home. And we've been in here since 1735. But archaeologically, we're very young in Iowa. When archaeologists look for old Indians, they're not looking for us. So we're very grateful for people like these two past speakers when they talk about our archaeology, because sometimes we're ignored archaeologically. But we get older as we go east. We're very old in Wisconsin. We're old in Michigan and in Ohio. We're the old people. When I get contacted by Ohio archaeologists, they're excited for our villages and what they find. And once you pass this, we get lost in archaeology because nobody knows who these people are. And that's been And Iowa has been known since. So, and then when we came to Iowa, the French were still here. And after the French and Indian Wars, the French left. And when they left, they came down, they went to Green Bay, got on the Fox River, jumped on the Wisconsin River. They're going to go on the Mississippi down to New Orleans and leave. The administrative, the government of leave. So when the French came down to Gravity Chain, we stopped all the boats and canoes and told their people, remember those people we were going to exterminate? Well, they're still around and they're waiting for us. And they're still there. So when you get on the Mississippi, go stay in the middle. Don't come ashore. Don't go ashore. If anybody falls in the water, they are gone. So just keep going. No matter what happens, just keep going in the middle. So they entered the Mississippi on the Wisconsin Mississippi River. They hit the Butte. And in the Butte, there's about 3 main villages on both sides of the river. So they start shooting. Then they hit Clinton, that little bunch. And they hit Rock Island Davenport, which is the center of Saudi and Meskwaki land. So there's thousands of men out in the bay practicing. Then they pass Rock Island. They hit about where Fort Madison is. Another bunch. Then they hit St. Louis area. And that was the last. And we said goodbye to the French. And we still remember the French. Not so much today, but when we were kids, my age group, and from kids since the bombs wars, but we didn't want to go to sleep. Our parents would say, go to bed, or that Frenchman out in the woods is going to come in and cut your ears and eat them. And we said, oh my God, there's some crazy Frenchmen out in the woods. So for a long time, I believe there was some crazy Frenchmen out there. And then the British come in. And with the British, we have a very good relationship. We like the British. We still think highly of the British. But then something happened. The English citizens of this continent rebelled and revolution, which were celebrated, I guess. And a new people were born called Americans. And they finally crossed the Illinois River, and we met the Americans. And it was the army. And the officers, we talked to the officers, and they had swords. So we called these people, get you Mukuman. Well, like swords, online. But over the couple hundred meters, it's gotten shortened to Mukuman, which does not technically mean white people. It means American. So the Americans didn't want anything from us except land. So beginning in 1804, we started selling our land. And eventually, we sold all of it. Some people went to Kansas, some people stayed in unorganized land in Iowa. And then the settlement moves in. And these people were from the United States. People that have been fighting Indians for 100 years between King Philip's War and the Black Hawk War. It's 100 years. So when these people said move, you move. They were very dangerous. And then, but in the 1850s, a new group of people came into Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, mostly European immigrants, Northern European, like Danes, Norwegians, Swedes, Czechoslovakia, Poland, all these groups came into Iowa, just as we were coming back from Kansas. So we met these people, and we knew they weren't English. They spoke another language. So we got to know them people. And counties developed, county government, state government. And in 1856, Iowa passed the law allowing us to remain, not to return, but to remain in Iowa. And the following year, we purchased our first 80 acres in Tama County. And pretty soon we got to know these people, our neighbors. And because of their big beards, when they talk, their whiskers move. You know? So we call them catfish people because of the whiskers. And because as a tribe, we were lucky enough to roam our old homes. We knew farmers that had farms. We had a personal relationship with our farmers, especially in central Iowa. And most families have their Indian stories of Indians coming to their creek. So, and we went to town. We got to know those particular people. So, when we came to a town, who do you think we got to know first? Who do you think we got to know first? Nobody can guess? The butcher. We got to know the butcher first, because he had the meat and the Tama. The next person we got to know was the baker, because he had the flour. And we got to know what kind of breads they made, what kind of sweets they made, like donuts, different types of sweets. In Cedar Rapids, we got to like goulashes, which I think is Czechoslovakia, I think. I don't know for sure. But so we got to know what all these groups had. Bologna. We got to know bologna, different types of bologna. And we got a taste of head cheese from the children, things like that. And these people were all different groups. And in Iowa was made from different groups that I just named. That includes Hispanic people, Black people, Asians, that was Iowa. And they were all mixed in. And the tribe just became another group. And people, when we started our powwow, People came to our powwow because we went to their celebration. So that's how that worked. So, but we were lucky enough to move to our winter camps clear up to World War II. We had that freedom. So our cultivation process was slower, more gentle than rough. So we cultivated gently into the modern world. And by World War II, that's when the winter camps ended. And so today, we are still those ancient people that lived out in the East Coast. Because our people would recognize us, because we still pray to the same gods. We have the same ceremony that connects us to our ancestors. We eat the same food that connects us to our ancestors. They would recognize what we eat today traditionally. I'm not talking about chickens and cows, but our traditional food, they would recognize. And the way we speak, because of language drift, might be a pinch different, but I believe they would still recognize us when we speak. And we feel connected to our people, all the way up there. We are losing people. And today, we are somewhat changed. My wife and I came this morning and we drove a car, a hybrid car, which we like. And when nobody wants to cook, we have pizza, our made rights, or Chinese, Mexican, whatever's around, Subway. And the clothes I'm wearing, my wife got them. But we are those same people. And English we speak is a Central Iowan accent with a pinch of Meskwaki accent, because that's the English we learn. Our cousins, the South people of Oklahoma, they talk like Southerners, which is very strange listening to them because we're the same people, but they totally speak English with a Southern accent. But then they make fun of our Midwestern accent. So in some ways, we're typical Iowans. We're, in our families, we have the same feuds of Iowa and Iowa State. So in some ways, we're typical Iowans, proud Iowan. And we're typical Americans in some ways. But we are still Meskwakis. We still remember where we come from, where we live, and we're still home. But Iowa was saved because in Kansas, there was a big council meeting with all those immigrant tribes. And they built a big house, and on the sides were delegates. And so the Meskwakis are invited. As soon as they walk in the door, they look around, like we always do. Us Meskwakis, we always know where we're at. And we looked around and we saw our old enemies sitting there. People, the same people that tried to kill us all. And we stopped. And we told those Indians, we hate you, we hate you, we especially hate you, and we don't like you. We're going back to Iowa, and we're going to go live with white people. So we did. But that was, you got to remember the times. There were still Indian wars. So we came back to Iowa, surrounded by white farmers with guns. So if any tribe would come to us, you would have to pass through all these people. So that was our thinking. So we've been here in Iowa, and that's about it. If there's any questions.
Where in Iowa do you live? Where in Iowa do you
Oh,
live?
well, today I live in Marshalltown, Iowa, with my wife, grandson, and our, I don't know what, granddaughter-in-law, I guess, and our first great-great-granddaughter, our first great-granddaughter. And 2 cats, which we lost one a month ago, and we're still feeling it a little bit, and 2 dogs.
Can I ask a question? Other questions? Yeah, like how much bigger is the settlement now than the original, wasn't it like a piece of land that was bought at the settlement?
Well, it started out with 80 acres. By 1890s, it was about 3,300 something. And it was that size for the next 100 years. Until gaming, we started gaming in the late 1890s to the 2000s. Then we started buying land north of the highway. And now the settlement is about 7,000, doubled in size. But for a long time, it was just 3,000 acres.
What percent of your people speak Meskwaki, and how are you preserving your language?
Well, we have a high percent, as a tribe, we have a high percentage of speakers, fluent, part fluent, and everybody knows words. And as a tribe, our language is not, I forgot the degrees, threatened, endangered, extinct. We're up here. So we're lucky in that. And the transfer of language is through family and school and the language department, which is mostly adult education. So we try to, because that's the rule. When we have newborns, we don't baby talk. Because if we talk to a kid like that, that's always going to talk. So we talk to him like little people. Just talk. because those brain cells are connected. Each sound they hear, each visual thing they have. So we never baby talk our children. We treat them like little people. And that's part of the transference of trying to connect that brain to the language. What's the question?
All right, jogging. Is there any like Meskwaki foods or cuisine that's unique that you share about?
Well, we're talking about traditional food, which is plant and animal. We follow a seasonal life. In the spring, when we came back from our winter camps, we ate greens, young shoots of nettle, plant fiber, and we would put in our crops. And in the fall, we would harvest our crops. And we would store away some and take some for winter. And the summer meat was mostly deer and fall buffalo hunt. And we would go for winter camp just to survive winter. Because if you're an Iowan, you know Iowa tries to kill you every winter. That's how come Iowans have blankets in the trunk. And anyway, so then we would redo the cycle. And our meats would be from buffalo, deer, beaver, raccoon, muskrat, and smaller game such as rabbits and squirrels. But that was little kids' game. That's what they trained on to hunt bigger game, because every Meskwaki boy wanted to be a big game hunter. Even a long time ago with Mastodon. So, and then with meat, I don't know how to answer that. But in the modern age, of all the animals that were introduced to us, we like the most. We like pork. Of all the animals that they introduced to us is hog. And we like beef too. But we never got a taste for lamb. We hardly eat lamb or any animal like that. That answers the question. And we have fried bread. Fried bread, in some tribes, fried bread is pretty scratching. But with us, when we first met the French, they set out their goods and they had little sacks of flour. And they gave it to the men, and the men turned around and gave it to their wives, their mothers, their sisters, their nieces, and said, what else? And the women went around the edge of the village and dumped out the flour for the bag. So there was at the beginning, there was a big white circle around the village. So, but then sooner or later, they started learning how to cook it, make bread, fried bread. So that's our history of fried bread, which we still make.
I have a question for you. So American history, 4th of July is coming up a week from Saturday. Could you talk a little bit about Proclamation Day and kind of tying that into the connection between the Iowa, or between the state of Iowa and Meskwaki and what Proclamation Day means to the tribe?
Proclamation Day is July 13th. In the 90s, the tribal council made it into our tribal holiday. So we get a day off on that day. But, and every Proclamation Day week, people call me up and they say, tell me what it means. And I always have to answer. That answer is more personal. What does it mean to you? Because I said, because Proclamation Day is just a date, July 1st, is when the Butler family, somebody was born to town, and maybe grandpa said, hey, if you go to Toledo, drop this deed on. So that's when it was recorded. That's the simple fact. But what it means is, to me, that day we became landowners. And we became legal landowners because we didn't get a reservation. Our reservation was in Kansas. So we purchased our first land. And oral history tells us that in Kansas, the chiefs were taunted. They wanted to come back home. So how do we do that? And a white friend, nobody in history has forgotten that man, but a white friend of theirs said, you know what you guys need? And the chief said, what, Bob? What do we need? And Bob said, you need a deed. And they said, explain a deed. So he explained the deed that you own the land. And in theory, nobody can take that away from you in America. In the United States, it's your land. Nobody can take it away. And from a people that just lost their land, that sounded pretty good. So they said, let's go get a deed. So that was the main purpose of purchasing the land, was to get that piece of paper that said, this is my land. And that's what happened. Every purchase we made was, and then the governor said, I can't force anybody to sell you the land. I may be the governor, but I can't do that. You have to find the person yourself. But once you do, I'll put it in trust. So we looked at 3 places. Tama County, we kept Yomeka, and Iowa City area, that county. But we found the guy that came up County named Isaac Buffalo and sold us the land for $1,000. So that's the mechanics of Proclamation Day. And so it's up to every person to answer that themselves, because nobody can answer that, because it's a matter of faith. Nobody can tell you what to believe. You have to believe it yourself. So every year we get together and we celebrate. And we celebrate by eating and dancing and playing games. And we think, ultimately, it's a good day to be a Meskwaki. At the most simplest point. It's a good day to be a Meskwaki. And we celebrate together. And before I leave, I'd like to thank Brennan and Terry for organizing this. Because they're the ones that actually planned this. Terry walking back and forth from the tribal office, getting things ready, the gym, things like that. They set up the chairs. So I want to thank you. Thank you.
Okay, one last piece before we wrap it up. Jonathan, would you mind hold on? Kathy and Cindy, would you guys come up? Cindy, would you mind coming up?
Thank you.
So your check's in the mail. But what I have for you today,
We don't get paid much.
these are all volunteers. On behalf of the Iowa DOT and the American 250 Committee for the state, we wanted to recognize and thank you all by providing you a certificate of appreciation for your time, for your planning. I think most folks know we rescheduled this event a couple of times. Yeah. But it means a lot that you're willing to share those stories, help us learn some of that history, help us further understand Proclamation Day. Just a really unique Iowa American 250 consideration. You guys are awesome. Please give them a round of applause.
You want to stand
Stand
up
up.
by the sign,
Yeah, but it's not.
not in front of it?
There.
Oh, I do want to say DOT did a great job on making my hair look nice.
Oh.
It never looks that good.
And then. I was.
Okay, lastly, before you go today, the Tribal Cultural Center and Museum is open till 5. If you've not been over there, go check that out. Make sure it's signed, the logbook, on your way in. And thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.